Hi everyone and welcome to today's webinar, Blazor 101, Pages, Parameters, and Sharing Data. My name is Jason Barris. I'm an SVP here at Infragistics. My email, jasonb@infragistics.com, and I want to thank everyone for attending today. I know you have a lot of options for your time, so it means a lot that you decided to attend this webinar or even watch it in the follow-up. I also want to thank the team that's online. As usual, we have the A-team, Pablo, Zdravko, Brian, Jesse, JJ, and others from the product team are on standby to answer your questions live as the webinar goes on. So a little introduction about what we're going to do today. A quick overview on the application that we're going to try to build. We'll look at a demo of an understanding how routing, navigation, and pages sort of work in Blazor. This isn't really a master class. I'm just going to show you some handful of things that you kind of should know and you can apply right away to working with App Builder and how Blazor works. Then we'll wrap it up. We do have the poll again, so I'm going to kick off the poll in a little bit. And of course, ask questions in the Q&A or chat window, and the recording will be sent tomorrow along with the slide deck, so you will get this in your email. So let's go ahead and get started. So I always want to highlight that we have the most robust grid that you can imagine for Blazor on the market today. Every feature that your users really need to deliver beautiful interactive experiences or get a beautiful interactive experiences in your application ship with the product. So if you're not using our Blazor grid today, please take a look at it. And today, during the demos, you'll see some of the capabilities and features that it has, which really enable you delivering those amazing experiences to your customers. So a little bit about routing. I mentioned this is not a masterclass on routing. There is a masterclass document that I'm going to show you on Microsoft's website. There's a lot to routing and pages in Blazor. I'm going to show you the fundamentals on just getting things working today, but I highly recommend that you read this document. I added a QR code to make it easy to access, to learn all of the capabilities and features, because there are absolutely some advanced techniques that you can use for routing, and they're all outlined in Microsoft's online documentation. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our demo. So the first thing that I want to highlight is the link that I had in the slide deck. This is the ASP.NET Core Blazor routing and navigation page. This is the Bible on everything that has to do with routing and navigation in Blazor. The reason that I'm not going to go through all of this in today's webinar is, as you can see as I scroll, there's a lot going on here. I'm going to show you the basics, the fundamentals, but there's all kinds of neat things that you can do with routing. I'll highlight some of them today, but really as you are getting into your journey with Blazor, you should be learning how routing works because it is one of those fundamental aspects of the product. So now today, we are going to be using our Northwind Cloud app. Everything we're doing today is going to be read-only. We're not doing any CRUD, and we're going to use some of these APIs in App Builder. So what I've already prepared is an application here in App Builder. I've got 5 menu items. I added some different screens with grids, and then I'm connecting into my Northwind Cloud API for some various screens. So for the customer screen, I'm just getting the entire customers table. For reports, I'm creating a chart, and I'm using the API for products above average price. If I edit those data fields, it automatically determined that I had product and unit price. I didn't need to do any custom aggregation, or I didn't need to edit any of those values here in the editor. I just used it straight up, and it did all the work for me. If I go to customer order history for customer ID, this one's a little bit different. I'm actually going to pass a parameter to this individual screen, customer orders by customer ID. So the API I'm using for that is customer order history, customer ID. So if I go to my Swagger and we scroll down, we'll see customer order history. It expects customer ID. So I'm going to try it out. I'm going to type in Alfke here and execute, and then this will return the order history by this particular customer. In the application that we're going to work on, we're going to pass these parameters in as a page parameter and a component parameter. So you'll learn how that works. Same deal here, customer order history for the grid. It's a different API. It's just called customer orders. And then I'm going to pass in customer ID. So here, if I go to customer orders, customer order detail, this was customer orders up here. We'll try this guy out. We'll type in like Blonde P, which is one of the Northwind Traders guys. And there are the fields that are going to come back. And then I've got this playground. I'm really not going to do anything here. I thought we might do something with the new combo box, but not really for today. And then I've got this screen, which is the customer grid chart screen. And on this guy, I'm going to take these two and I'm going to convert them into components, and we're going to pass the application state for whatever's typed into this box to these components so that they refresh as you type it in and hit enter like a little search box. So it's going to be pretty cool. If I go ahead and run this application, this is what it's going to look like when we run it. And you can see we've got our different screens, and these are hard-coded for now because when you add the data through the Swagger guy, it shows you how to do that. And you'll notice that my final link here is not there for my screen called customer grid chart, and it's because we're going to add that through the nav link through the control that gets generated. So let's go ahead and download the zip file for this guy. And I'm going to go ahead and open the folder here. I'm going to copy this, or actually I'll extract it here. I'll extract all. And I'm going to copy this to another folder on my C drive. Just my navigation routing state. Let's go ahead and copy this. Go to C, dev webinar. Let's paste it in. The reason I'm doing this is because I'm on a Mac and I'm using Parallels, so it's got those wacky backslash things in there, and things don't work very well when you have that in your Visual Studio. So I just put it on my C drive, and then all of my paths are correct. So we can close that. We can minimize this, and we will double-click our project here, and we'll get going. So let's take a look at our dependencies. We'll make sure we've got our Ignite UI Blazor trial, and I think we're ready to go. So let's just go ahead and hit run and see what this looks like. As expected, we have our customers, our reports, customer order, customer ID. Keep in mind we hard-coded ALFKey here. We hard-coded ALFKey here when we added the data source. This is not something that you did, but I did it when I added the data source. Playground, we're not going to do anything with Playground. I don't believe. I wanted to play with the new combo box. But we did have the other customer order page, which we need to add to our nav. So first, let's take a look at how the basics of navigation are working. So if I go to app.razor, you'll see I've got my router component. The router component is what Blazor uses to parse pages in your application. So if we go to the pages folder and we look at the @page directory, it has a parameter or a page name. Page name in this case is customer underscore order underscore history underscore cust ID. When your app compiles, Blazor's keeping track of all of these pages, and that's how it knows where to route things through the WebAssembly that it created for the client. In this case, I have several pages here: reports, playground, customer. Customer grid chart, however, is one that we didn't add a nav link to. So when you create a new Blazor WebAssembly application, you have the nav link, which is those little hyperlinks. On the left, it was fetch data, the weather service, counter, and something else, survey. So every default Blazor application has that, and that's the navigation that it's using is through navlink. So you've got the router and the navlink working together to do navigation in your app. In this case, we are using, in the shared main layout Razor, we are using the IGB navbar control, which is essentially doing the same thing, it just has more features. So in this case, for each nav drawer item, we have a page to navigate to route to, and then the name of it. So I want to add one more to this. So I'm going to go to this nav drawer item. I'm going to copy this guy and we will paste. There we go. And I want this to be called customer grid chart. So let's do customer dash grid dash chart. And we're going to say customer grid chart. So if I look at customer grid chart and we go to customer grid chart, it is customer grid chart. This is not case sensitive, so it's okay if it's capitalized or whatever. And now go back here, whoops, to my main layout.razor, and this will add it to our menu item and it will navigate to that customer grid chart item. And then for playground, I guess we can comment this out. We'll get rid of playground. Okay, I'm going to hit save. Yes, we will save you as a solution. Let's go ahead and run this guy again and check out the results. Our page pops up. I've got customer grid chart. Again, hard-coded ELF key. This is my ELF key. This is the ELF key chart. And what we're going to do is we're going to improve this page, among others, with some parameters to load dynamically the customer ID. So let's go ahead and close this guy out. And the first thing we're going to do is go to our customer order cust ID and customer orders cust ID and add our parameter. So how do parameters work? When you are passing a parameter to a page in any URL, of course, it is being appended to the URL. So it's the same thing in Blazor. So what I'm going to do here is I am going to add my squiggly, and actually we're going to do our / and then our squiggly, and in this case I want to pass customer ID. So customer ID is what we will be looking for after the slash. How do we use customer ID in our page? Well, that is done with a public property. So I'm going to say public string customer ID, and we'll do get set on this guy. And in order to light it up to be a parameter, we use the parameter attribute like so. So now I have a parameter attribute called customer ID that is getting passed in as the customer ID to my page. Now I can go ahead and use this throughout this code block, whatever gets passed in. In this case, get customer order result is calling our service. So if we go to this definition, we have a optional parameter, customer ID. So ELF key is getting passed in. That's why it works without me passing in this parameter. So if we go back to our page, I want to pass in customer ID from here on out. So I'm going to say customer ID should be what's passed in. Now let's do the same thing on our other page. So I'm going to Control C. I'm going to do the same thing, do a Control V here. I'm going to pass in my customer ID, and I need to tell this page to accept this customer ID as its parameter. Now, the other nice thing here is you'll notice I've got this little placeholder to reference a property in the HTML. I can just use the same property name prefixed with the @ sign. So I'm going to say customer ID. Now customer ID, customer ID, customer ID, customer ID. Same thing here. Let's keep ourselves honest and we will, whoops, make sure that our casing is correct. Customer ID, and we'll say for @ customer ID like so. Control C. Now, why is that? Okay, that was odd. I don't know why it was squiggly red, but there we go. So now let's test this out and see if we can get some parameters into these pages. Our browser kicks up. I've got my customer order, customer ID. Sorry, there's nothing at this address. How does it know this? If we go back to our app.razor, remember that if the page is not found, and in this case, the page is not found because there's a missing parameter, we're going to get that error message. So let's go ahead and pass in Alfke, like so. And we should see the chart for Alfke. Now let's see Blonde P. And we should see the chart for Blonde P. Now the same with our customer order history. Same thing, nothing at this address. Let's go ahead and type in Blonde P. And there's Blonde P. Very cool. So what happens if I still want to load my page, even if there is no parameter? Well, you have the optional parameter in Blazor. So here, if I go back up to my parameter and I add the question mark, it means that my page will still load, but I didn't pass any parameter in. So in that case, I could say, hey, if string is null or empty, set customer ID equal to something and whatever, just my own if statement. But we're not going to go through all that trouble today. You get the point. I'm just going to show that you don't have to pass a parameter in to get your page loaded. So let's go back here. My page loaded. Let's go back here. My chart is empty, but my page loaded. You can see order history 4, and there is nothing there. So what's next? The next thing to do is look at how to pass parameters from my text box to my charts here, or my controls. So when I type in, for example, Blonde P, these guys will load up. So let's go ahead and look at that page. Let's go to our customer grid chart page. And there's a few things that we want to do here. We could pass in a parameter, but we're not going to do that right now. What we're going to do is we're going to work with this IGB input. And on its changed event, I want to call a function called refresh data. Now, where's refresh data? Let's put this guy down here. So we will do protected override async task refresh data, like so. And on refresh data, we want to refresh the data. So I'm going to drag these guys here so I don't have to duplicate it. And I'm going to call refresh data from here. So when my page loads, let's call refresh data. How am I going to set refresh data? So here I've got my private string value Alfke, and that is set to value. So if I go back up to my value on my changed event, not value changed, just changed, when I hit the enter key, I want it to use the bind value for this value here, which will be by default Alfke. So I've got refresh data. Oh, let's get rid of our override. There is no override. So protected async task refresh data. But what's happening is I'm still not passing in anything to this function. So I'm going to pass in value. So in this case, let's pass in value. So whatever is here, I want to pass into here, which should be what changes here. And I'm also going to say, show me value. And that's it. Let's go ahead and run this page. Jump over to customer grid chart. Let's type in Blonde P, hit the enter key, and I've got Alfke. So now let's type in a root, hit the enter key, nothing happens. However, my binding is occurring, and only the savviest of you will tell me what's wrong, and I think someone did. I am not telling the page to refresh. We need to set state has changed. The other thing was we did not get the right color here, so it's not change, it's actually change. So now that's purple. So on change, I want to refresh data, and we will call state has changed. Now we will get the correct results. So no parameter being passed in. We're actually just using an internal variable on the screen to load our property. So Alfke popped up first, as expected, because that was the default property. Type in Blonde P, type in a root. Now, if I go back to customers and then I come back here, I'm back at Alfke. I don't want to do that. what I want to do is keep whatever was here before. So I need to set up some state in my application. So how do I do that? So I'm going to go over to models, and in my models, I'm going to right click, add a new item, and this is going to be called selected customer. Now, selected customer is going to be a public class that will hold a public string called customer ID, and we will get it and set it. So I'm going to change this namespace here because I want it to be my Northwind Cloud namespace, like so. So let me Control C and use our Northwind Cloud namespace. And there's my public class, selected customer, customer ID. So now what you're thinking is, okay, if I am in this page and I create a new instance of selected customer, it's not going to retain whatever value this is, and that's correct. So what we use is dependency injection. So if I go back to my program.cs here, you'll notice we have this add scoped, and add scoped is going to inject a dependency that you can use throughout your application, sort of like not really a static, but almost. So let me do a builder.services.add scoped. And what do I want to add scoped? I want to add selected customer. Customer. Sometimes this code IntelliSense gets ahead of you. But so now I've got this dependency injected class called selected customer, and I want to use it over here in my customer grid chart page. So every time I pass a value here, I will retain it across this selected customer object so I can use it in other pages. And this is how you could maintain state in like a stepper control or something else. So in this case, I'm going to inject selected customer, and I'm going to call it selected customer to keep it simple. Now, how do I use selected customer throughout this page? Well, I'm going to change value to be selected customer. So here, let's change this to selected customer dot customer ID. And I want to use that now across my page. So let's Control C, not value, selected customer dot customer ID. I'm going to go down here. Let's use selected customer dot customer ID in whatever I pass. So now my binding here, we're going to leave it at a private string alfkey for now. And let's kind of take a look at what the results are in this binding. So let us just set that customer ID. And to prove this out, let's go to customer orders, and we have an optional parameter, customer ID, coming in, but let's change this to selected customer dot customer ID. And of course, it's got the squiggly because we are using dependency injection. So we need to inject this into the page, selected customer as selected customer, like so. That should work. It's pretty straightforward. And actually, let's change this variable as well so we know right when we get into the page. It's really straightforward. So I'm not going to use customer ID being passed in here. Remember, question mark is optional parameter. I'm going to use whatever happens to be in this selected customer.customer ID, which is set over in this binded value. So let's run this guy and see what we get. So let's go to customer grid chart. Got nothing there yet. Let's type in alfkey. I hit the enter key. Now I've got alfkey. Let's type in blomp. Blomp comes up. Let's go to customer orders. Well, look at that. Blomp. Customer hist. Nothing, because we didn't do anything to this page. Let's go back here, blomp, back here, blomp. So what we did is we created a class to hold this object, and through dependency injection, we're saving that state to be used across other screens. Now let's do a root. A root shows up, and here we've got a root. So life is good. All right, so now what about the situation where I've got components and I need to pass variables to components? So in the case of like a grid, I'm passing like data, primary key, display density, all this stuff. How do I do that with my own components? So let's go and add two new Blazor components. This is going to be called the orders grid. And the other one is going to be called the orders chart. Orders chart. Now, orders grid and orders chart, we're going to dissect or decompose our customer grid chart razor page, and we're going to stick it over on this new page. So what I want to do is I am going to take my IGB grid and I'm going to cut, right click, cut this out of here, and I'm going to stick it in my orders grid. So get rid of that H3 and Control V like so. And there we go. A couple things I'm going to need here because I'm going to be doing my data access from here, and I'm going to use my dependency injection. Let's go back here and copy this here, copy, and go to orders grid and paste this up at the top. So I've got things that I need to set this up, but you can see we've got some errors here. So we need to address that right away. So let's go back to our order grid chart. And what I want to do is take what I need for the chart. So, or I want to take what I need for the grid. So the chart is using order hist result. So that one's the chart. So this is going to be the grid. So I'm going to Control X this. And let's go to our orders grid. And I'm going to paste it in here. And let's go back here and not hist result. Order result. Let's grab this guy, Control X. And I'm basically taking this screen and tearing out parts so I can reuse them across other screens. The cool thing here is how you pass parameters to those screens. So in this case, I've got my Northwind customer cloud, blah, 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 blah. And of course, these are all squiggly because I'm not done setting this up. Now, if you remember, if we went here, what we were doing was on initialize async. So what do we need to do to load up a component? Especially when a component is expecting a parameter. So if we go back to our orders grid, we want to do a protected override async. And what we want to do is on parameters set async. So what's going to happen on parameter set async, we're going to fill the Northwind Cloud customer orders result. So let's stick that guy right in there, and we should be good to go in that case. So how do we get selected customer populated here? Well, in this case, we need a parameter to fill in. So we're not going to use selected customer just to demonstrate this, because then in the case of passing a parameter to this, we can just set a value. So we're going to pass just any arbitrary value name. So we're going to do public string value, and this is going to be a get and a set. So on public string value, we're going to set this value from the incoming page, which hosts the component. And of course, this is going to be a parameter. So it's a different type of parameter, not coming in from a page, but it's coming in from a property on the object. And this is an async await. So let's make sure we do, let's make sure we do this correctly. Let me get rid of my insert key. Async, like so. Okay, so we got our async task. Northwind Cloud result equals that, but this is just going to be value in this case. So it's a property that we're setting on the component. So let's go ahead and set value here. And because we're calling on parameters set async, it's going to run this every time the parameter is set on the control. Now, also on this control, what I want to do is get rid of all these fields. We don't need them. Let's just use order name, order ID, and ship country. Make it look nice and tidy. And I think that is going to work beautifully. Great. So I'm going to get my value, set my value. I've got my selected customer here, which we're actually not going to use. So I'm going to get rid of that. Don't need it. I am using Northwind Cloud Service, so that's okay. So now let's go back to our order grid chart page. So how is this going to work? So if I go back up here where I removed it and I do my open bracket and I say orders, well, look at that. There's my orders grid. So my orders grid will function just fine now, but it'll show up empty. What do I want to do? I want to set the value. What is the value going to be? You guessed it, at selected customer dot customer ID. Exactly what we've been using everywhere else. So my dependency injected property, which I've been sharing over a bunch of different screens, will work as a property for this particular component. And we can get rid of all this. We don't need that. I think we're ready to go. So let's hit run and see how this looks. So let's go to customer grid chart. There's my grid. Came up beautifully as a component. Type in Alfkey, hit enter. There's Alfkey. Type in BLOMP, hit enter, BLOMP. Go here, BLOMP. Everything works exactly like it should. So if we close this guy out, we go over to, well, we could do the same thing for the chart. We won't, just in lieu of time, because it's just, it's all, I always go over on these and I don't want to keep everyone, but you get the point. I created a component. The way that you create properties on components is through setting public parameters on the component that you're passing values in. You notice that this will update every single time. And the nice thing is, let us right click. Let's go to add a new Razor component. Let's call this guy multi-page. And what do you think multi-page is going to do? It probably should be named something different, but multi-page is going to be an @page, and this is going to be called multi-page, and I'm going to pass it param1, squiggly param2, 2, and param3, like so. So I'm going to pass multiple parameters to this guy, and I'm going to do h1, and I'm going to say @param1, and we will copy this twice. AV, let's do 2. And so we're going to get those parameters over here. Let's get rid of this h3. And here we're going to do parameter, and you guessed it, public string param1 get set, and let's copy this twice, or paste it twice. 2, 3, and here we will say orders grid value equals param1 param2 and param3, and it might look better if we do like Control X. We'll do that one here, and Control X, do that one here, and there. So we've got param1, param2, param3. Why is that squiggly? Param3, param3. Ah, param, missing an A. Let's go ahead and hit run. And we should have our 3 parameters here. So let's type in /multi-page, and let's run Alfkey or root and BLOMP, and boom, there we go. We've got 3 grids with 3 different customers, and that's how easy it is to pass single parameters, multi-parameters to different pages. Now, there is a key thing the data type of the parameter as well. So in this case, if I said this must be an int or this must be a date time, you could force a specific type as a parameter, and that's just another way to check. So now if I run this guy again and we try to run it, we will most likely see some sort of an error. So let's do our multi-page, multi-page again, and there's nothing at this address. Let's see if we did get an error here. Go to developer tools, no error, but it is looking for a string, or I'm sorry, an integer. So now if I change elf key to a number and I hit enter, I'll get an error because here what I tried to do is load, or the casting is incorrect, so it's not a valid cast. So you do have that second level of protection when you are passing parameters between pages for validation. And so that is this part here in the docs, bool, date, time, decimal, etc. And it'll allow you to choose what you want. So with that, I think we've wrapped up here on all the good stuff that has to do with parameters, passing parameters to components, passing multiple parameters to a page, how to set an error page for parameters. So this should get you going, at least if you didn't really know how to make all this work. I do particularly like the fact of being able to create components and pass those properties to those components. That's actually pretty cool. So let's go ahead and wrap this up. So there you have it. Routing, pages, navigation. I showed some cool features and capabilities there. Hopefully you saw how powerful not only App Builder is in terms of creating the application that we demoed with, but then how you can use additional features in the Blazor framework to make your applications even more useful. The poll has been kicked off. Please answer the poll. It drives the features that we deliver in the product. So all of your answers are really important to us. If you attend many of these webinars, don't feel the need to answer it again, because I know we may have your answer like 10 times already. But if you're new, please let us know what you're thinking in the poll. We really appreciate it. Next steps, go ahead and get Blazor today. You can sign up at appbuilder.indigo.design. We also have a playlist up on YouTube. The Discord link is here as well. Discord is really important. It is where you can get real-time support with the team. So all the questions that you had answered today in the Q&A, you can get on Discord whenever you want. So you just go up on Discord, register, and then you're chatting directly with the product team. And at any given time, there's going to be 5 to 10 to 15 people from the product team online and your peers in the community to help you answer questions. So with App Builder, we really do believe you can get 80% of your design and dev time back. If you recall the last 2 webinars where we did taking your applications and making them responsive, and then we added in the last webinar, we talked about CRUD and how to enable CRUD in your applications with forms and inputs. You know, you're doing a little bit of work, but the bulk of the hard stuff, where it's layout, responsive screen design, all of that can happen in the tool, where you're saving all of that time every single day, every single week. And I know that the need for App Builder will ebb and flow. You might need it for a few weeks, and then you might not need it for a few months. But when you are in that mode of doing new screens and new dev, App Builder really is the best thing that you can do to accelerate delivery of your application. And with that, I want to thank everyone for attending today. Again, we really appreciate your time. Please check out infragistics.com/products/App Builder. All of this code will be up on GitHub. So when you get your email tomorrow with the recap of this event, along with the link to the video, you will get a link to GitHub as well. I want to thank everyone who is online answering questions today. I want to thank everyone for answering the poll. And with that, I wish everyone a great rest of the week, and we will see you at the next webinar. Thanks again.